Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 65. This week we ask numerous questions without offering much in the way of answers. Plus, we discuss Eddie's successor for 2021. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Welcome back, guys. It is two episodes before things kick off, so we're getting pretty close now. I'm joined, of course, by Dan. Hi, mate.
Hi, Andy. You okay?
Yes, I am good. I'll be honest. I have one key question for you today, and I'll ask it at some point. I'm kind of relying on you to take the reins on this one.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. There's a few parts this week I've been looking at from a sort of obviously from an England perspective, and looking at obviously with the upcoming Six Nations, it's important that we cover that. But also let's look at England a bit longer term. See where we're going, see what hope we have. I mean, this week, and I think there's the ease to sort of overcomplicate and overstate sort of the seriousness of it, but only one English team made the quarterfinals in Europe, which is not reflective of where we are internationally. No. Well, in theory, isn't reflective of where we are internationally. Well, it's definitely not reflective of where we are internationally, but it's interesting that that's happened. And I've got a few theories, but I want to throw by you.
I'm curious, mate. I'm curious. Let's hear what your theories are.
Okay, so and actually, it's the timing's fairly telling. Matt Dawson today has come out and said that England players play too much.
Just before you carry on, mate, I now don't have a question for you.
Oh, was that it?
It's fine. Carry on. This is it's clearly we're on the same page. This was what I wanted.
Cheers for that.
Yeah, now I offer nothing to this episode whatsoever. But you crack on, mate.
So yeah, Matt Dawson's saying the England players play too much, and he's saying especially in relation to counterparts in Ireland, Wales, and Scotland. Yeah. Now that's true. So let's have a look at this slightly. So let's have a look at the so obviously saying play too much, fatigue, injury. Our current injury list from an England perspective, if you look at people who are thereabouts in the squad, in the forwards we have Tom Curry, Charlie Ewels, Ellis Genge, Nathan Hughes, Matt Mullen, Beno Obana, Will Spencer, and obviously Billy Vunipola. For the backs, we've got Elliot Daly, Piers Francis, Rocco Duguni, and Henry Slade.
Is Jack Noel back then? Is he fit again?
Well,
or he's due back?
Noel, I believe Jack Noel is sort of currently sort of cleared for full training, right. As is Ben Teo, although Ben Teo has been out since October, let's not forget. Yeah. Is that too many injuries, or is that just the nature of the game these days? I haven't compared this to the Ireland and things because I don't know what they've got.
No, fine. Well, we're not the Irish Rugby Pod, but that I think there's probably a bit of both. Yes, it's any injuries. There's too many injuries, particularly from key players, but they're also to be expected. I think it is inevitably the nature of the game. I think one of the things that Eddie Jones made very clear when he came on board was that he wanted to have a squad that could cope with problems like this, and he wanted to train at kind of peak physical, whatever the word is. He wanted it to be like match. In fact, I think he said they train harder than what they would expect to find in matches, so that they're prepared for them. And it's frustrating, obviously, particularly when you have people like Billy who've been out for so long, and you're looking forward to seeing them come back. It's frustrating for sure. But yeah, I think it's probably part of the nature of the game. And it's interesting. So Matt Dawson, we're huge fans, obviously. He does like a bit of a moan, firstly. You have to kind of look at things and say, well, look, is it actually a problem or is it an advantage, the playing too much? I mean, under Eddie Jones, Japan, did what they did. And because Eddie was ruthless. And I know that's talking about one team, and we're kind of talking about, all aspects of rugby. But you've got to say that the team that comes out the other side, I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to say.
Because I don't put this as an England problem. I put this as a club problem. So I guess my question to you is, so the Irish are a few, the Welsh to a large extent, they have control over their, let's say they're superstars, they're superstar players, they're rock and roll guys.
Yeah.
The English don't, the clubs do. Are the Irish and Welsh rugby unions better served by having more control? Or are the English system better? Because obviously that's the competition. They're playing at that intensity week in, week out.
But that's exactly my point. I actually think it's better. I think firstly, it's very hard to give the control to the. Well, I mean, as things stand for us, we can't. You know, England aren't the employer, albeit that they do give them a bit of extra cash.
A little bit.
Yeah. But, you know, at the end of the day, you know, most rugby players, it's their clubs. That's their career. So I think when you start trying to sort of hold them back and say, no, we're saving... And I think you lose something. If you start saying, oh, we don't want Billy playing for Saracens for the next 3 weeks, we want him to have a rest. You know, you're losing something in him. I think these guys, you know, they don't want to have this time off. You know, Billy
said he wants it.
He wants some sort of reform. He wants it to be more sensible. I don't think he's come out and said, "I want 3 weeks holiday, please." So I'm not sure that it's a difficult one, and we're definitely not best placed to kind of work out the solution to it. But
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I mean, from what you're saying, you're basically saying that sort of all Premiership and English rugby players are complete pussies.
Is that what I'm saying?
I'm pretty sure that's it. Okay. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but let's just say that's factual statement coming from you now.
Okay. I mean, we'll let the listeners decide what they heard, but yeah, sure. It's a difficult one. I don't know. Weirdly, I mean, this is why I was going to ask you the question, because I don't know the answer. What do you think?
I don't think. Well, let's be realistic. Practically, the RFU, the English RFU, are not going to have control of superstar players because it's just not feasible. It's like the argument about should the women players be paid as much as the men? Yes, of course they should, ideally. But that's not the world we live in. That's not a capitalist market. You can only pay what sort of the economics of the situation allow. And the reason that the English RFU don't do it is because the clubs, and the reason the clubs have the ownership of the place is because they pay their salaries.
Yeah.
And that's the way it works. That's our setup. So we need to, I guess, probably move away from the argument of is the Irish one, is the Welsh better suited, because it doesn't matter.
Well, exactly.
Sorry, mate. But what I do think we need to do, I do think there is a balance to be had, though. I do think.
I think we're the problem with this argument is that you're almost making the assumption that the clubs aren't interested in player welfare, which obviously isn't the case. You know, the clubs don't want injuries. You know, Saracens are not happy about the fact that Billy Vunipola is out for another 12 weeks. It didn't happen during an England game. You know, so I think the clubs have a responsibility to the players, but not from an international perspective, but from a human perspective. You know, they need to, and they want to make sure that their players are fit and healthy and can manage the workload. I think one of the things that's quite interesting in this argument, Matt Dawson obviously said what he said, but a big part of what his argument was, you know, you've got all these guys and they've just been on a Lions tour. Well, a Lions tour isn't going to happen again between now and the World Cup. So this season has been particularly brutal.
But does that hangover carry on to the World Cup?
I would like to say no, not with these players at the kind of the peak physical condition that they're in, with 2 years to kind of sort themselves out. I think, you know, this is where the clubs obviously have to get it right. But, you know, on the one hand, you're talking about, Irish players get 3 weeks off. And on the other hand, we're saying, they've been on a Lions tour 2 years before a World Cup. They're never going to be fit enough to win in 2 years' time. And it's like, well, hang on, this is crazy. You know, I think they're two very separate things, and it's the reason why the Lions happens, you know, midway between World Cups, because there is enough time to recover from it.
Yeah, no, sorry, I'm choking there. No, I get that, and I guess, I mean, it's easy to say the Lions, but England obviously are touring South Africa this summer, so.
But the South Africa tour will be a very different beast to the Lions tour. You know, it's what is it, 2-3 test matches?
But 3 test matches, yeah. But don't forget, that's time those players, and say let's look at the Saracens players because they're in Europe. Let's say Saracens do go all the way in Europe, and I'm not, whether they win it or get to the final. They will finish. Maybe they'll get to a Premiership final as well. They'll certainly be in the playoffs. They'll finish, and then when they're going ahead for free, let's face it, South Africa, however crap they might be at the moment, and however much they've been little bitches, they are still a very physical team.
Yeah.
And that's going to take its toll. So when a lot of other rugby players are sitting on the sofa or sitting in the sun on their sun lounges, wherever, the England players are out there taking a fairly physical impact. And yes, they come back. Yes, they get a bit of extra time off, but are they getting the rest they need? Is there more that can be done? I think the answer is yes, there is.
How much time do you think is needed?
What? The downtime?
Yeah.
Between this. So as it stands, I don't think we're wrong. I think it's about 6 weeks at the moment, if I'm correct.
That's what they get.
I believe so.
And I think that's not taken into account at all?
I don't think that's taken into account at all. So I think you're 6 weeks before sort of pre-season starts. Now, it's not necessarily even about the time off. It might be about. I remember hearing Danny Cipriani say that the best pre-season he had was basically fitness focused. It was sort of fitness and skills focused. Mm-hmm. Whereas him saying like he felt really fit all season, he felt really capable all season. Whereas if they're doing a pre-season that's hugely physical, it takes its toll. And that's what I mean by if they're playing matches week in, week out, fine, that. So let's say everyone has that 6 weeks off, body resets, mind resets, that's fine. But then if you're playing week in, week out, you're suddenly like, oh, for God's sake, you're just beating the shit out of me.
Yeah.
And do you have that time, the relevant recovery time, bearing in mind how physical a game it is now, bearing in mind how big these guys are, how strong, how quick they are? Are we, that's where I think the argument lays. I don't think it lays necessarily in the off season or giving that time to recover, because I'm sure even the England players on tour will probably get the physical amount of time to almost take it back to sort of bodies firing on all cylinders, but it's about sort of managing that throughout the season.
Yeah, no, true.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, well, I was just going to say the other thing, of course, is that we have got this huge injury list, and of course, all these injuries, there's a lot of rest time in there.
Yeah.
So, they're getting their rest. They're just getting it with injuries.
Yes. Yeah. But isn't that a good way? I mean,
it's probably not a solution.
It's not right. This guy's
run him into the ground.
This guy's played a lot. Barrow's played a lot. Yeah. Let's take a baseball bat to his knees.
Rest when you're dead.
And then he'll be fine. I mean, you're the one who called them pussies, so maybe that could be your job. Take the baseball bat to their knees and give them that recovery time.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I mean, the trouble is, it's so competitive, and with so many teams kind of, providing players that can potentially represent the country. To the guy, despite what the likes of Billy Vunipola has said in the media, do these guys really want the time off and the potential to lose their spot? It's much easier, in Ireland where there are only 4 or 5 teams that are creating the national side. There's far more competition in England.
Yeah, I think they want the time off if everyone gets it. They obviously don't want it necessarily just for themselves.
Yeah.
I think they probably want the system where everyone gets 3 equal time. So like you say, them having time off isn't counterproductive for them. But what's going to be interesting, and typically it would be Saracens, who are the only English team through to Europe, who, let's face it, add quite a few players to the old England squad. It'll be interesting to see whether, because there's still plenty of players outside of that, perhaps people who aren't playing in Europe, to see whether, they might be a bit fresher because they don't have the physical and mental exertion from these European
certainly
games.
Yeah, certainly from the point of view of this Matt Dawson argument, a lot more of the England side does have time off now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that as far as all but Saracens are concerned, it's more of a moot point. And you're right, it will be interesting to see come Six Nations what impact that has. I think as well, it's easy to say, Saracens are the only English team left in Europe. but the games have been close. So that's not, at the end of the day, a loss is a loss. But it's not like, all the English teams were absolutely, taken apart and just weren't even competing. They were there or thereabouts, and it didn't go pan out. Maybe that'll end up being an advantage come Six Nations.
Oh, it might be a bit early come Six Nations because they'll still have all played sort of up to now. But I wonder whether come maybe the summer, maybe come the start of next season, whereas these players might have had sort of slightly less game time, whether they are that little bit more refreshed going into a World Cup year, not the worst place to be.
Yeah,
what we're going to hope.
Yeah, I just think that you're talking about relative small amounts of time. You think the recovery, if you gave them a week off, like as in 1 game week off, effectively they'd have. I mean, the difficulty is you can't give people time off and then throw them back in because they have to be match fit.
Absolutely. So I think that's, again, the argument is finding that balance, isn't it? So rather than saying, you're going to be playing week in, week out for the next 10 weeks in a row, might be, okay, you're playing 3 weeks in a row, then you've got 2 weeks off and things, because in 2 weeks you're not going to lose it.
No, exactly.
And then you're back. So, and I don't have the answer for this, and I don't think, well, clearly no one has the answer for it just yet, but it's something to bear in mind. I mean, Matt Dawson, look, it's his job now to make headlines, to get himself known, to keep himself out there. I mean, he's part of the media now, and that's what it's all about.
I mean, what's he saying? That in 2003, he and his teammates had a lot more time off and weren't nearly as kind of physically challenged as the players are today?
No, in fairness to him, I don't think he's going down that route. I think he's just saying, me English players have been playing a lot of rugby and it will take its toll, and he's worried about how that will impact the World Cup.
I mean, I think World Cups. I mean, we should move on from this point, but I think World Cups ultimately are a very different beast, and I think 2007 was a very good example of where kind of pride and passion and things do really play a part, because that was a side that was probably fortunate to even not qualify, obviously, but fortunate to make it into the knockouts. Like they just weren't a good side, and yet they, from reading various autobiographies and things, they put their heads together and they said, "Come on, lads, let's do this for us. Let's do it for the pride of wearing the shirt." And lo and behold, they found themselves in the World Cup final, and they were the first. Well, they weren't first team to have a crack at it, but they had a crack at being the first team ever to retain the World Cup. Obviously, that particular record is now gone, but. So I think it's difficult to say 2 years out, or more than 2 years out. No, what am I talking about? It's next year, isn't it? However long it is.
18 months.
18 months. I think it's difficult to say that what's happening today is going to impact that. It's knockout rugby at the end of the day, and all the teams are playing week in, week out when the time comes. And I think it's about being the fittest. You've got to be the fittest side, and to be fit, you've got to keep going. As we all know, you can't take time off within reason. Obviously, you need downtime, but you can't take long stretches of time off. You need to keep the fitness levels up in order to maintain it. So, it's a difficult one. I don't know the answer. We need a solution, obviously, to try and put a hold on all these injuries. We've said it. I think we said it in the last episode. We've certainly said it in conversation. The one kind of not silver lining, but the one thing with Billy is, of course, that all his injuries are different. So it's not like a reoccurring thing he has that's, a little bit like Manu, who seems to just constantly have the same injury over and over again. Billy has had 3, it's incredibly unlucky, but 3 different injuries. And once he's recovered from those injuries, he seems to come back and those issues are no longer there. So with any luck,
not for a game or so.
At the end of this particular injury, he's injured everything and it's all been fixed, and he's fitter and stronger than ever. So that's what we obviously need to keep our fingers crossed for. But I don't know. I don't think you can put Billy's injury down to being overworked. I mean, he cracked his arm on somebody's head.
Yeah, no.
Do you know what I mean? That's not a conditioning issue. That's simply, unfortunately, his arm got in the wrong place at the wrong time and it hit something very hard and he broke it.
And once again, to quote you, that's being a pussy issue, right?
Is that right? So now I'm calling Billy a pussy as well.
Well, mate, you're
I hope he's
a braver man
listening.
than
I
me.
hope he's listening because if he's hearing what I'm hearing, I think he might have a different opinion.
Okay, well, we'll see.
I will give him your number and your address.
I have it on good authority that Billy does listen as well.
Excellent.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is probably a question that isn't going to go away. I don't think there's a simple solution, but I don't think you want to start trying to change things 18 months out from a World Cup. And I think you have to look at the record and say, look, they've achieved that record under the current conditions. So why should it need to change? It's the best record England have ever had.
Yeah.
And the statistics have to speak volumes at the end of the day. And so I think maybe Dawson's a bit jealous that he's worried this team might be better than his one.
I think at the moment he's still a World Cup winner. I think he's probably pretty happy with his lot, but I can't say I know him particularly well. So
no. Anyway, what's next on the agenda?
So I heard something interesting this week. So last week, because I think I've gone on non-stop, I refuse to say the name Don Armand, but I'm allowed to say it again. And I'll tell you what, that's such a relief. Just taking the stress off my shoulders. I've missed you, Don. But I can talk his name. But I heard quite an interesting piece last week, actually. And I believe, I apologise if I've got the wrong person, but I believe it was David Flatman.
Right.
Good old Flats. He was talking about Don Armand being left out from the England squad. And I'd never looked at it from this perspective. So I thought it was interesting to sort of throw it to you and put your perspective on it. So one of the things he was saying is, realistically, if Don Armand were to come in, it would be in a Chris Robshaw type role. Mm-hmm. And you only need one of them. So does Don Armand, the way he's playing, does that offer more than the way Chris Robshaw's playing, plus all the other impact Chris Robshaw has on the squad? And there's been a lot of chat about how much impact he has on the squad. Obviously, he's an ex-captain, as a leader, etc., etc. So does a young Don, I mean, how old's Chris Robshaw now? Sort of 84, 85, something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so he doesn't necessarily have long left, but he's proven he can still perform at that level.
Oh, I mean, since he lost the captaincy and everyone thought his England career was over, he's just got better and better, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's been brilliant.
And I think
he is a brilliant player.
Defensively, he does an awful lot. And Don Armand, and to be fair, I don't know his defensive statistics, but
they're pretty impressive, mate. They're pretty impressive. Just what I'd pre-warn.
No. What I was going to say was, is he? We know we've talked about the fact that one of the issues that Eddie has kind of put to Don Armand or the media or whatever is that Don Armand likes to find himself out on the wings and kind of in space, and he likes to kind of get involved with the backs where Eddie has said he wants more heavy traffic through the middle. Does the fact that Don Armand likes to find himself in those positions means that in that situation he's not where Chris Robshaw would be, which is in the thick of it, getting his hands dirty? And that's not to say that he can't do it when he is in that situation. But do you know what I mean? Like, is there more value in having a Chris Robshaw who's always there, who's always at the bottom of every ruck, working to win the ball, working to turn it over, or create penalties? And do you know what? Perhaps that's another. We know that Chris Robshaw has the leadership and the experience. He's a senior guy. He's been around the block with England. We know he's a workhorse. Don Armand perhaps has more impact as a flair player, but is that what we're looking for?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Is the answer. All the reason I brought it up is because I've never looked at it as a. Is it either Chris Robshaw or Don Armand?
We don't know for a fact. Would you be happy to lose Chris Robshaw to bring Don Armand in?
Yeah, and we don't know that has to be the case, but it was something that was brought up, and it interests me. So I thought that is a good point, because I don't want to lose Chris Robshaw. I think Don Armand's a better player currently, but
I suppose though you're saying he's a better player, but this again it brings us back to that same point. Like, he's a better player at doing what he does. But is he a better player than Chris Robshaw at doing what Chris Robshaw does?
My opinion is yes, but I've also got an opinion is, does he add more value overall?
But I think that's all. That's kind of part of the same thing, isn't it? I mean, what Chris Robshaw does is his whole package.
Right.
I think if we look at Don Armand and say that Don Armand is better than Chris Robshaw at doing what Chris Robshaw does, then the answer is simple. Don Armand is a more valuable inclusion for England than Chris Robshaw. But if we're saying that actually, what Don Armand does, he does very well, but he doesn't do what Chris Robshaw does as well as Chris Robshaw, then I think Chris Robshaw is the answer. If that's what the current sort of, I mean, and this whole debate is kind of, at the moment, it's kind of being swayed by number 8 and what we have available at the back.
Yeah.
Because of course, in an ideal world, you've got Billy at 8, and therefore, Chris Robshaw makes perfect sense. Without that, and without Nathan Hughes, maybe Chris. I don't know. It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't have the answer to this. I just thought it was an interesting point.
It is an interesting point. Yet another one that we have no answer to. We're doing well this week.
Unresolved point we bring up. God, we're awesome.
We're giving an entire episode of questions we don't know the answers to. Discuss.
But if anyone does have the answers, please get in touch and educate the two morons who are chatting right now. Because there's actually, I'm going to move on and bring up another segment of which
you don't know the answer.
I don't think I have the answer to.
Brilliant.
So, looking at fly halves. So, obviously we got George Ford. We've got Marcus Smith and Owen Farrell, who's brilliant. But I kind of want to see, let's say Owen stays at 12, okay? Because he's just, I mean, let's face it, it doesn't matter where Owen plays, he's awesome. But let's say he stays at 12. So then we've got the fly halves. I'm starting to worry about, should the worst happen and say George Ford and a Marcus Smith get long-term injury, where are we looking for the backups? And the reason I'll say this, I'll go through my point a bit more. You start to worry, you look at someone like Lazowski, Piers Francis, who are probably currently on the radar a bit more. Well, Lazowski is playing second string to Owen Farrell at Saracens. So is he having as much game time as we want? Piers Francis doesn't really seem to be stepping in at 10. And he won't be now. Dan Biggar will be going to Northampton as from next season. Mm-hmm. So Piers Francis might be lucky to get much game time at all. If you look at that. And if you look at Wasps at the moment, they've just signed, Sapanga, or I forget how to pronounce his name, but he's basically the number 2 Kiwi fly half. He's a hell of a player.
Yeah.
So Danny Cipriani is going to look to move from Wasps, I would imagine. Now, the chance are, firstly, let's rule Danny Cipriani out of the England setup. I don't think Eddie Jones is looking at him. If Danny Cipriani goes to another club, I don't know a club. Let's say, for example, he went to Quins or wherever, where perhaps we've got the young up-and-coming fly half. Danny Cipriani is going to be starting against most fly halves in the Premiership because of what he adds. Are we in a position where potentially, actually, if we lose a couple of good fly halves, we could have trouble in that position? This is a very roundabout way because very few countries have more than 2 very good international fly halves.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think first and foremost in that situation, Owen Farrell, you immediately have to start saying maybe he isn't a 12 anymore. So I think you have him to look at too. If he gets injured, well, we can kind of play this game all day long. I guess the question is how many, and obviously as many as possible, but realistically, you just said most countries don't have more than a couple of world-class fly halves. How many would we want to have? How many would we expect to have?
Do you know what? Here's the problem. I've just sort of heard back what I said in my mind. I bored myself with it, and I don't think it's a relevant point at all. So I don't really know why I brought it up. This is why dates keep walking out on me.
You keep telling yourself that's the reason, mate.
I just keep talking too much about English fly halves. Apparently dates don't like that. Apparently women don't like that on a first date. Yeah, it's true. It was just...
I hear what you're saying, but I guess maybe we're a bit spoilt by the fact that England have got such strength and depth at the moment. Except apparently at number 8.
which is still pretty strength in depth. I mean, Sam Simmons is pretty good.
Yeah, there are a few options. Zac Mercer, okay, we don't feel like he's ready yet, but he did lead England to the World Cup final in the under-20s, and has had a pretty good season with them. And we know that Eddie's not, he brought Marrow up from exactly that same position when he hadn't played for the England senior side, and he was playing the odd game for Sarries at the time, and he brought him in, and he's now an absolute England stalwart. So,
he's all right.
Maybe Zac Mercer will be another one of those decisions that Eddie makes, and we all look back on it in 6 months' time and go, "Why on earth did he wait so long?" So there are a few options. Tim Arna Harrison is potentially still there or thereabouts, so I don't really know what he's doing at the moment.
What's he going to do with fly half?
No, I'm talking about just generally. I thought we were on number 8, but sorry, I thought we were on number 8. Like, if we're talking fly half, right now we don't have a problem.
yeah, fair enough.
Right now we have about nine options at fly half.
Yeah. Fly half was probably a redundant point. The number 8, like you say, the number 8's again. We actually have got options because we've got Billy and Nathan who are fine injured. Then you say Zac Mercer, Sam Simmons. I think any 4 of them are more than capable. Yeah,
I agree. So I don't think we need to worry too much. It's not obviously what we all wanted to see. It doesn't feel like it's the, we know it's not the first choice as things stand. But we've got 2 guys, potentially 3 guys who have an opportunity to make put their stamp on things, and it'll be interesting to see how they get on, and depending on what route he goes down, I think we'll know this time next week, maybe tomorrow, next week we'll know exactly what he's thinking of doing. But first game is Italy, and we'll see what happens. I think Nathan Hughes is due back for the last couple of games, so we might still see him in the Six Nations, But yeah, I think we're probably okay for fly half for now. I think let's maybe revisit that particular question if we find that our 300 fly halves that we currently have available all suddenly get injured, maybe.
I just thought it was a point worth mentioning.
Interestingly, brings me on to my next question, because although I didn't have any, I thought of one. Totally kind of not off topic, obviously, but kind of a little bit bizarre. I was thinking about this. If you were going to play for England. And we're not assuming that you're good enough. We're assuming you're literally just going to get chucked in as you are right now. Maybe you've had a little bit of fitness training and you can last 80 minutes.
Right, mate, I can boss that now.
Seriously though, what position? Because so context for the question: amateur rugby, particularly at the lower levels, often the wing was kind of deemed as the position where you chuck the guy that doesn't really know what he's doing. Yeah. If in doubt, put him on the wing. He's kind of out the way. Obviously, it's different at the top level, but what would be the position that you can get away with kind of, being the least good? Would it still be wing?
I think it would have to be. I mean, if we're talking about me personally, having played 10 most of my thing, I'd probably put myself in now. If I had to go, based on my ability, I'd probably put myself in at 8. Because we got a bit of injury there. I'd be like, sit down, Falatau. Warburton, don't even make me laugh. Get away from me. And just, Brian, seriously, mate, I'm going to knock you out. So that would be me personally. But I think it would still have to be wing. As much as anything, if you put someone in, I don't know why we're playing Dungeons and Dragons version of the England rugby team. I have no idea. But if you had to, it would have to be wing. As much as anything, the physical implications of, you can't put somebody who's not playing in at a 10, for example, even if they're a quality amateur 10, then suddenly be like, is that Billy V running at me at full pelt?
Yeah, but it's interesting because you joke about 8, but if you more often than not when there's a red card or even a yellow card, 8 is one of the positions you often lose. So having someone who is obviously not very good at rugby by comparison to the guys on the field stepping in at 8, maybe you can kind of hide. The reason I asked the question is obviously we have this problem at 8, and it's obviously ridiculous to pose it in this way. But if you lose a player on the pitch during the game, often it's the 8 that you kind of do without. And so actually, is is us not having the impact 8 that we all want to see in Billy or potentially Nathan Hughes, is it less of a concern than perhaps we are making out?
I think you can adapt your game plan around it. I think because we've relied so heavily on the ball carrying 8, we automatically go, oh shit, we can be in trouble. But I think Eddie is well aware of this, smart enough, certainly smarter than any of us, and tactically, that he realises, I don't have a Billy, I don't have a Nathan, so we need to look at how we can compensate for that elsewhere, and I'm sure he's done that.
And so I guess the question, going back to the question of whether wing is the place that you can get away with the most, let's assume we didn't have the huge plethora of wingers that we do currently have. Let's assume that the 2 starters were world class, but beyond them we didn't actually have much quality. All we had left would be, I don't know, I can't think of someone at the top of my head, but essentially you don't really want to lose one of the 2 guys available, that you start with, because you're not particularly fond of the third option. Would it be a bigger loss at this level, at international level, for England to lose a world class winger, or to lose a world class number 8?
I would say a winger, because I think that at this level, assuming you lose a world class and don't have somebody of the quality to replace them.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to obviously still have a decent player, but they're just not world class.
Yeah, I think the bigger loss is at winger, because the speed and skill of the wingers these days in international rugby, if you don't have somebody, I think that can be exposed.
Well, there you go. So actually, that's flipped your opinion, then, isn't it?
I was talking more around if you put somebody who's just nowhere near international level and they're going to get absolutely destroyed, where can you hide them from the brutality of the game? I think I was looking at. Whereas now you've managed to word it in just a slightly more relevant way, shall we say?
Less Dungeons and Dragons.
Less Dungeons and Dragons version. I think you can probably cover better a lesser number 8 than a lesser winger.
So this potentially bodes well for England, who are currently, their issues currently reside around the number 8 shirt.
Yeah, I think we're doing a big disservice to Sam Simmons and Zac Mercer.
No, 100% we are, and I'm not suggesting these guys are not good enough to step up. But this is the kind of the huge concerns that people have, and I'm talking rugby fans as opposed to the pundits, about the loss of Billy and Nathan Hughes at the same time. Actually, this is perhaps, I think what I'm trying to do is give our listeners maybe a bit more positive energy to kind of look forward to the Six Nations without thinking, without Billy we're in trouble.
Well, I mean, yeah. No, fair enough, and it is a good point. It is a good point. Where can you swallow your losses? And like you say, I mean, Eddie. Anyone who's seen the article, as Eddie says, we've got no chance. So, he was obviously joking, guys, in case you haven't seen that. But I think it's actually a good point, because, and it's something we say quite a lot. We're always like, oh, but England, they're doing this wrong, they're doing that wrong. It's like they're not doing much wrong. They've got 95% win record. And I think Eddie Jones just made a complete mug out of all of us who are questioning him when he's like, yeah, mate, England have no chance, do they, sport?
What nationality was
like
that?
Well, Eddie's mix. That's a mixture. That's the mixture between his
that's Australian,
Japanese and Australian roots, yeah.
Okay.
And I think Eddie probably made a bit of a mockery of us all, saying, actually, it's a good point. England is still a incredibly class team.
Yeah.
But, we'll continue to do it, as will everyone else. We'll continue to constantly question everything he does.
I think, joking aside, I think that's what we've kind of signed up to do here, is to question things and with any luck get proved wrong wherever we think he's got it wrong, so that come the end of next year, we can say, we always thought they could do it, and despite all our questions, the right man delivered the right team to put in the right performances, and they raise the trophy at the end of it all.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So, yeah, it's a good point. Like we said, we'll question it, but Eddie has, I think, put a bit more perspective back on it again, which is always good, always nice. So, speaking of which, and again, this is going quite far into the distance, not quite Dungeons and Dragons far into the distance, but with Eddie signing his new deal. And we were talking about it last week. Is this good for English rugby? Is it not? Let's go along the route that actually there could be a positive thing. Someone take over. Who could the next England coach be? For me, there's only one answer. I think it has to be Rob Baxter. I think what he's done at Exeter, what he's achieved there, everything, he's the man.
Yeah. I guess, yeah. You
is that it? Yeah.
Well, no. So I was going to say, the powers that be, what was once the 52 old farts, have said
good reference
that they would, obviously they would like to pick the best English coach for England, but more importantly than that, they want the best coach for England from wherever that person may be, and as they've done with Eddie. So. Yes, Rob Baxter, his CV certainly screams consider me. But is that a? I mean, you're saying you've got one candidate in mind. Is that with a view to also considering who else is out there, or are you thinking English coaches?
So I have no issue with the head of England Rugby or the head coach for England Rugby not being English. I don't mind that. But if there is an English coach who's what Rob Baxter, not just performance level, and let's face it, performance has been brilliant from Exeter, but it's about the environment. I mean, in looking at World Rugby, I think he's out there. And if we've got an outstanding coach who is English, who actually is in the Premiership, understands the English game, I think we'd be foolish not to have that person.
Yeah, we don't want to go for an international coach just for the sake of saying, he's
a big name.
Yeah, he's a big name in World Rugby. I think you're absolutely right, and as are they. They want the right coach for England, the best possible coach for England to take over from Eddie, whoever that may be. And cherry on the top would be that, as you say, he's not necessarily English himself, but involved in English rugby. And that's where his experience comes from. And I agree with you. I think Rob Baxter's CV definitely puts him on that list. It's probably too soon. As we talked about, there's 2 years after the World Cup for all of this to come together. I know they'll be having conversations now. I don't know when. Well,
probably not now. They'll probably start those conversations after the World Cup.
Do you think? You think they won't start to have conversations, even if it's not Eddie kind of getting involved? You don't think they'll start having conversations before that? Because
I don't.
The new person, whoever it is, needs to be involved with England pretty much from immediately after the World Cup. Because the idea is that they're coming in as Eddie's number two, in theory, aren't they? So that Eddie can kind of almost work with them to hand over the reins smoothly 2 years later. It's not that Eddie's going to pick someone who comes in after 2 years. It's going to be someone who's going to work as a number two for 2 years. Is Rob Baxter going to do that?
Yeah, but I think the problem with having these conversations now is the world changes too quickly. I think you almost need to have that conversation after World Cup. Like, right, who's available, who's doing well? Because if Rob Baxter suddenly has a shocking view, I'm sure he won't, starts messing up. His name's no longer on that list. So I think my personal view is they won't start having those conversations till after the World Cup.
Yeah. It'll definitely be interesting to see what they decide to do, but they are going to need. I guess the big thing is they're going to need someone, who's at the top level now, or there or thereabouts, who's prepared to come and be a number two for 2 years.
Well, the dynamic's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because if for example you ask for whoever, even a Rob Baxter, or for argument's sake, saying I don't know Joe Schmidt, say after me, no one's really going to want to come in as the number two, and that's not how we position. Now, Eddie's not going to want to, whilst he's still officially the coach, won't want to give up the number. So the dynamic of how that works could be quite interesting.
Well, that's exactly
my worry. Eddie will stay the whole time.
Well, my worry is that you do potentially miss out on the best possible coach because you can only get the best available who's prepared to take that. It's an interesting one. I mean, the thing is, if England wins the World Cup next year, Eddie Jones, not only is he world coach of the year last year, and who knows what will happen over the course of the next 2 years, but if he wins next year, you'd almost be mad not to take him up on the offer of being his number 2 for 2 years with a view to taking over after that, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But there is a pride element. I mean, obviously there's cash in English rugby, so that always helps. But yeah, it does potentially mean that you miss out on, the best possible person. Can you imagine? I mean, it's not going to happen. Clive coming back, working with Eddie for 2 years and then taking over, and he's not going to do it, but.
Yeah, they can. I mean, there was chat of Clive.
I know, being involved this time.
A French job.
Yeah.
And there was also chat of him. Well, not now because they've got a new coach, but there was chat of him taking on the French job, and apparently he said he'd be interested.
She's potentially interested to come back into rugby.
There was with Clive, actually, one of the things, so interestingly you bring him up, because they mentioned something alongside, and somebody said to Clive, would you be willing to work alongside Eddie? And he was saying how good Eddie was. But in his position as coach, he wouldn't have been willing to work as a number 2.
No.
Like, he wants to take the reins. So I think, like you say, I think what you say is actually a really valuable point. I also think we need to look at, they won't position it, obviously, as we keep saying number 2. They obviously won't position it as number 2. It will probably be positioned more as a consultant role. So you're the consultant coming in, just watching how Eddie and his team do it. And then gradually you'll start getting more and more power.
Yeah.
And almost empowering that person who's coming in.
But then we are talking semantics. It really is just a name. At the end of the day, you know that you're coming in to be a consultant for 2 years with a view to taking over. You're essentially the number 2. It doesn't matter what you call it.
People are pretty dumb and pretty vain. Like, someone offers me a job, like...
if someone offers you a job, that's the point, though, isn't it? If someone offers you a job,
I think most people are like, do you want to be the washer-up boy? I'll be like, no, piss off. Do you want to be executive in charge of cleanliness of cups and saucers? I'll be like, that sounds important. Count me in.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, mate. You would do that. You would fall for that trick, but we don't want you as the next England coach.
Well, don't we?
Well, no. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see how that pans out, because Eddie Jones, when he was interviewed about this and was asked the question about who's going to make the decisions, said, as long as I am the coach, I'll be making the decisions. The final decisions will be made by me. He was very clear about that. So they're going to need someone to come on board who knows that ultimately they're going to take charge, but is prepared to be that number 2. And I wonder whether that is going to impact the quality of the person that they can bring in at the time of bringing them in. Because I guess the other thing we to bear in mind is that maybe they're not saying, look, actually what we want is the best person for the best coach available right now. We want the person that we think can be turned into the best coach in 2 years' time.
I don't think you do that for England. And why don't you want me as the England coach?
Well, let's cover that another week.
Okay, and just in case my date from the other night is listening, of course I'm not going to be the England coach. I'm busy being astronaut school and the manager of that orphanage I told you about. So obviously the England coach is off the line. But I don't think you take an England coach based upon can he grow into a role.
But that's what they're saying they're going to do.
Well, they're not saying grow into it. What they're saying is so they can have a smooth transition. I think that's very different. I think there's 2 very different things.
Yeah,
I don't think they're saying who can we train up. I think what they're saying is,
yes, it's smooth transition, but they're essentially saying Eddie Jones has proved that he's the man. He doesn't want to stick around and do another 4-year cycle. We've convinced him to stay 2 more years. As long as he wins the World Cup, we want him to make sure that the next person does exactly what Eddie Jones does. Within reason, I think that's the way they're looking at it. Is if Eddie's not going to stick around to the 2023 World Cup, then we want someone who can come in and do what Eddie does. And the best way to do that is to get Eddie to basically train them for 2 years and then go, there you go, you go and finish the job.
Yeah, I think a lot of it's going to be player dependent.
Yeah.
Because don't forget, after 2003, and if we do win the World Cup in 2019, I suspect there'd probably be a lot of international retirements. Maybe not, but I suspect
it's a very young
yeah,
side.
that's a good point.
Yes, there's a handful, but most of the old guys who potentially would retire after the World Cup are the guys that we're saying, will they make it to the World Cup? You know, they're not the world class players. You know, our world class guys are the young guys who I think will be looking at, you know, potentially doing that at the following World Cup. Yeah, you think the likes of Billy is what, 23 or something?
25, I think.
25. So
Maro of Itoje.
Maro of Itoje, yeah, he's about 12.
Yeah.
So you know, it's interesting that and great for English rugby that the top guys are the youngsters.
Yeah.
And we don't think of them as youngsters. You know, we look at people like Marcus Smith coming through, who's 9, and you know, but he'll be another one if he carries on the way he's going. You know, give him 18 months. You know, he'll be. You know, people will be like, George Ford, who?
Do you think Marcus Smith still wears like Johnny Wilkinson pajamas and still has like a picture of Johnny Wilkinson on his bedroom door and stuff?
Of course.
Next to an old one of Pamela Anderson or whatever.
Don't you?
Yeah, I do. But you know, that's normal for me.
Cool.
Right. Well, so this week we haven't really covered Six Nations, but that's fine because I think the next sort of 7-8 weeks is everything's going to be Six Nation focused, and I can't wait.
Yep.
It's going to be great. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting. What happens? I mean, it is 2 weeks away, and then we're into it. It's come about quickly, and I cannot wait for the start. The Italy match. I think I've thought about this. Quite a nice way to start. Let's see where we are, and then we've got Wales, which, although Wales, quite frankly, is shit. The fact that it's England-Wales means they're going to put everything they've got.
Where is that? That's in
Triggers.
Oh, it's Triggers. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good, I think.
It's hang on, you're saying where is that? I am double checking. I
think you're right because I remember last year when Eddie did that whole thing
issue.
about it doesn't matter that we're playing at Millennium or Principality.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a piece of grass at the other end of the M4.
Yes, yeah,
wasn't it? That was last year. So yeah, no, I think that's good, as you say. It's like despite how good they are at the moment, or not, as the case may be, it's a psychological thing. It's Wales against England, and you just never know. And to be fair, okay, last year we only just beat them, just because of a piece of genius play in the last 5 minutes. So
yeah.
They've obviously gone downhill since then. England have improved since then. Hopefully we'll continue to do so. So, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see, and I, like you, cannot wait for it to start. But, yeah. So, guys, that's probably a good place to round things off for this week. Thanks, obviously, for listening again. Please get over to iTunes, rate us, review us, do all that kind of stuff. We didn't get a poor review, but someone only gave us a 2-star rating. Or
who was it? I don't know. What did they say?
They didn't leave a comment. Just dropped in a scared 2-star rating. So guys, please get over there and give us the 5-star ratings to make up for it.
It's probably one of the England rugby players scared of you after you called them pussies.
Review us, let us know what you think. Get in touch with us on Twitter or Facebook at England Rugby Pod. Let us know what you think about what we've been talking about today. Correct us where we've clearly been wrong about things. And obviously, if there's anything you'd like us to talk about in the future, it's really useful for us to hear what you want to listen to. So, let us know your thoughts. And hopefully, continue to join us every week. It's a big couple of weeks coming up, so spread the word. And hopefully we will be celebrating another Six Nations, victory against Italy, of course, but Grand Slam, that's what we want. So, join us again next week, guys.
Toodles.